Kodak Retina I type 013. This was the follow-up to the 010 and the predecessor to the Retina IA. Still has the knob wind, but has a full-length chrome top cover. This one, these came with an f3.5 Xenar or an f2.8 Xenar, and there are these ones, these weirdos. This one f3.5 Xenar, but it's got a different shutter. I think the base shutter is probably the same, but this is the earlier style of shutter, if you like. And what's the big difference with the earlier style of shutter? Well, it's not as sleek looking as this, but the real difference from a user's point of view is that on the earlier shutter your speeds were marked on the setting ring, and you had a pointer fixed to the middle of the shutter here. On the later shutters, the speeds are marked on the fixed front plate, and you just have an indicator mark on the speed setting ring itself, which you align with these numbers. From a practical point of view, as the shutter itself works, no difference, I would say, but I'll know more once we open all the shutters up and find out what we've got. So I've got 3 cameras here, and I'll service the whole 3. Basically, I expect all the bodies to be pretty much identical, and if they're not, I'll point out the differences. Otherwise, you'll just see one of the bodies stripped down, serviced and dealt to. And of course we want to deal with 2 of the shutters to make sure that the internals are the same, and that the only practical difference is the cosmetic change to having the speeds on the front plate compared with speeds on the setting dial. So, first task, to remove the shutter from the body. Now you're going to need a tool to do that. Typically with a Retina you need something like this, which was a tool made by someone called Beljan in the States, and Joe, as far as I know, has stopped making those many years ago. Used to be able to get them on eBay. From time to time you might see one second hand, but if you do, jump on it. Otherwise you'll need a tool that you've turned for yourself in a lathe, or find someone who's got a lathe and a mill who can do the job for you. And you can find dimensions on my website that'll help you get those tools made. So let's just open the back of the camera and see if we can get this shutter off. Okay, there's our shutter and lens assembly removed from the body. Let's put the body to one side for the moment. I'll just retrieve that retaining ring, put that with the body, pop that to one side, and this one is the later and more common style with the f3.5 Xenar lens. I'll just remove the shutter from the oddball camera. Since these all look identical on the outside, I have to do 100 mm. This is the one we want. I'll just remove the shutter from this and then we'll strip down these two shutters. Now I've got my two shutters side by side, and I can open them up and see what we've got. I'd sit in the camera that way up. Okay, removing the lenses, they should just screw in. They should be typically not much more tight than finger tight. That one's okay. This one's reluctant. I'll try a friction tool. A friction tool is a rubber stopper looking thing, which its great advantage is that it leaves no scratches. You do have to keep the rubber off the glass. That's why these are hollowed out. It's to make sure that they're only contacting around the edge. Those lenses out the way. Let's have a little look-see at these shutters. They both have a dress ring. It just covers up the centre of the shutter here. And are they the same? Very much the same. This is possibly thicker, but that may be an illusion. And the shutters themselves, let's get rid of that bit of fluff. We have the usual locking rivet here that you rotate in order to allow you to unlock the centre. To deal with that, you're going to need a tool like this. It's a screwdriver that's had the centre notched out of it to leave 2 points. Just rotate that rivet so that the flat is towards the centre, so it's not locking that bayonet mount. Okay, now this should just bayonet on. If I rotate that round to where the notches line up, this should do much the same. Oh, this plate here we want off. That's us. Here's our two shutters. Now how similar are these? Let's get them all in the same relative position. Set them down at the B end of the scale. And I'm looking for any obvious difference between these two shutters. Now there's obviously a difference in the diaphragm. This one, the older style shutter, seems to have quite a short sweep. Oh no, it doesn't. I take that back. It's simply sticky. That works very much the same. So the plates themselves look identical. It's just that the earlier shutter, of course, had to have the engraving on it. Just lift that off. The speed settings cam plate, this piece is known as. In the shutters themselves, this one, the earlier shutter, this is not flash synced. The flash sync would be sitting in this position. but it's just a blanking plate. I'm not seeing anything else there that's different. Okay, well, we'll carry on. I'll clear a little bit of space here so I've got room to put the parts down. Move some of these pieces, they'll be off camera for you probably. That's okay. You don't need to see everything. Let's move you over a bit. We're sort of struggling away here and getting off the centre of the camera. Right, so this main lever, let's remove that. The shutter release lever should come off its post. This little piece here, that's job is to hold the shutter in the cocked position. We'll remove that next. This is our B lever. There'll be a shoulder screw there that rotates on. This lever has got a return spring on it, and that effectively forms the return spring action for the shutter release lever. Just unhook that, lift it out of the shutter. This is our 500th of a second speed spring. It's the extra spring that's brought into action when you set the shutter speed to 1/500th of a second, and its job is just to provide a bit more push so that the shutter mechanism is forced to move a bit quicker. So the flash sink here, this contact, single screw, and this is just pushed down into the body there. On the older style shutter that was used in these oddball Retina I type 013s, there's just a blanking plate. Now that blanking plate, it looks like it's plastic, but it's actually painted brass. I'm looking at the rest of this now. So we do see a difference. On this, the later shutter, there's a pin right here which would activate the flash contact. That pin is entirely missing. This arm doesn't have that pin. So it's not simply a case of they were identical shutters and they cheated to make this a cheaper version simply by removing the flash contact facility. This was built to never have a flash. Alright, so far so good. I think now we can flip these over, remove the rear lens element and remove the outer case. And like the front group, this rear group is very reluctant to move, but a friction tool deals to it straight away. Now the outer case, there's a couple of small screws we need to deal with. The job of the outer case, quite apart from making the shutter look a little bit prettier, is to retain this piece here. This plate here is the click stops for your aperture settings. Anyway, let's back these screws up. So they just screw into the case slightly. There's a little divot that they push into, and this should slide off. And there's our depth of field connector. And the same with this one. There we go. So they're starting to look a little bit more stripped down. The next thing to do is to split the mechanism plate, that's this piece in the centre with the speed trains on it, from the case, which is this piece here. So there are 3 screws hold the case and the mechanism plate together. They're identical in length. That's the first one. There's our second one. Okay, let's carry on. Put the cases aside for a minute. Let's just concentrate on the mechanism plates. The shutter blades. The shutter blades go on in a sequence. The first blade is usually differentiated by the fact there's an extra hole right here that the other blades lack. It's an odd practice because the blades are otherwise identical and there's no special reason that you would need to do that. The blades are all stacked on in a sequence, with blade number 1 being at this point opposite that rivet on the case. 2, 3, 4, 5. So identical stacking action. I'll lift these blades off. These blades are a little bit oily, not too bad. You can see how the last 3 blades stuck together as I was lifting them off. This one much the same, I'd say, not so oily. There's blade number 1. The mechanism plates. What do we take off the mechanism plate? Right, so I want to unhook this spring from that the lever that moves the blade actuating ring, and there's a single screw in the centre there, and there may or may not be a washer typically sitting on top of the lever if there's a washer, and that's just to where it's present, it's just to take up a little bit of extended length on that screw so that the lever doesn't flop around. But it must be free to move. If you try and put a washer where there wasn't one, there wouldn't be sufficient space for it and the lever would be stiff in its action. So take those off. Flip these plates over. This retainer plate is held in with 3 screws in both cases. Now the screws may all be the same length. That was a bit loose. Now that's a long screw. If one of the screws is longer than its mates, take note of where that screw was. Because if you swap them around, life will not be good. So our long one is in this position. Remove that retainer plate and remove our blade actuating ring. This one, same deal again. That's the long screw. That's our retainer plate. Here's our blade actuating ring. So the mechanism plates are stripped down. That's as far as I strip these things down if I'm servicing a shutter. If you wanted to go crazy, or if you had a serious problem, you would remove the speed train here, retard gear train. Now if you remove the retard gear train, then you've got to set the retard gear train back up, adjust it so that your speeds will be correct. Now there's no reason to suspect that there was a problem with these shutters apart from the fact that they needed servicing. They're old and greasy and dirty and tired. So the settings will be correct, or should be correct. So you don't gain much by removing these, you're just looking for a lot of hard work. So I always clean these in situation, and I clean these with Naphtha, cigarette lighter fluid. So that's the next stage. For our mechanism plates, let's pop those to one side and deal with the shutter cases and the diaphragm blades. Okay, so with these, first thing I'll need to do is swing my lever around to uncover the screw heads visible here and here in this cutout in the plate, and loosen and remove those 2 screws. Don't bother fighting to lift those screws out. The plate will drop away behind and the screws will tip out. You don't need to go poking after the screws to get them out. Same deal with this. Swing this lever around until the screws are visible. plate falls away, and we should be able to recover our 2 screws. The cover plate, 3 screws. I think these screws are identical. On later shutters, and possibly on this one of the screws had a countersunk head, a flat head. These ones, just looking at that, no, that's not. So these screws are identical. So it means they can go anywhere. On the shutters on the Kodak Retina I, 2A and cameras, one of those screw heads was a flathead screw and the plate had been countersunk to accept that head. Okay, so we can tip the diaphragm out at this stage. Here is the setting plate. That's the piece that moves. That's the piece that's connected to the setting lever, and as that swings backwards and forwards, it forces the blades to pivot and move. Put these pieces where I can see them. Having 2 shutter loads of parts on the bench at once makes for a messy job. Okay, the rosette of blades. Now the blades typically come out in a nice neat rosette like that. They're oily, they need to be cleaned. This one, they look a bit cleaner, they'll still need to be cleaned. And that is the shutter pretty much stripped down to its component pieces, or both shutters in this case, and we can clean the components up and put everything back together. Cleaning these diaphragm blades. Here of course they're in a nice neat rosette, which will soon fix that. There we have our blades. They're a bit gummy with oil it's got between the blades. It just sticks them together. A problem that's always worse in cold weather than warm weather. In warm weather the oil is less viscous. It's not so much of a problem. So cleaning these blades, I clean them with naphtha, cigarette lighter fluid, cotton buds, Q-tips, and you do this very carefully. What I'm doing is wiping away any trace of oil that's on the surface of the blade, flip it over, do the other side. Be very careful, especially going around the little pivot points. It's easy to catch the cotton bud on them and cause problems. Most typically what the sort of problem you face is when you're cleaning it like this and your cotton bud catches the end of the blade and tips it up. You can actually just about fold the blades right over, and of course if you get a crease in them it's very, very hard to get it out. And even if you just bend it a little bit, it's very hard to get the blades to lie flat so that you can reassemble them correctly. So that's what I'm doing. So that blade there is nice and clean. I'll pop that up the top there. Now I'll mention this now. The pivots are not the same at each end of the blade. The rivet here is very close to the corner of the blade, the edge. The rivet here is closer to the centre. Now the rivet that's closer to the centre is the one that we will be fitting into this plate, and the rivet that's closest to the edge, that will be riding in the slots in this moving plate. So be careful of that. It's not important when you're cleaning them, it's very important when you are assembling the diaphragm, that you have the blades in the correct orientation. So as I clean these blades, I'll just pop them up at the top there on my piece of paper. Can you see that? Yeah, just can. So that I've got my rivet there pointing downwards, the rivet that's closer to the middle of the blade. That's the orientation I will want them when I'm putting them back in place. So I'll just go through now and clean the rest of these blades, get the oil off them, so that instead of looking like this, they look nice and clean and shiny. And clean up the case, the plates, and put the diaphragm back together.